Yes, it was a pickup. Plain and simple. And she was what one might call a granola cruncher. A hippie. And she was straight out of central casting. Sandals, flamboyantly long hair, financial support from parents that she reviled, and some professed membership to a apostrophe-heavy Eastern religion that I would defy anyone to pronounce correctly. Look, I'm just going to bite the political bullet and confess that I classified her as a strictly one-night objective, and that my interest in her was due almost entirely to the fact that, yes, she was pretty, she was sexually attractive, she was sexy. And there was really nothing more complicated or noble than that. And having had some prior dealings with the cruncher genius, I think the one-night proviso was due mostly to the grim unimaginability of having to talk with her for more than one night. Whether or not you approve, I think we can assume you understand. There's something in the way, a near contempt in the way that you can casually saunter over to her blanket and create a sense of connection that will allow you to pick her up. You almost resent the fact that it's so goddamn easy. How exploitive will you feel that it's so easy to get this type to regard you as a kindred soul? You almost know what's going to be said before she even opens her mouth. Okay, so now, there we are at my apartment. She begins going on about her religious views, her obscure denomination's views on energy fields and connections between souls via what she kept calling focus. And in response to some prompt or association, she begins to relate this anecdote. And in the anecdote, there she is, hitchhiking. Well, she said she knew she'd made a mistake the moment she got in the car. Her explanation was that she didn't actually feel any energy fields until she closed the car door and they were moving, at which point it was too late. She wasn't melodramatic about it, but she described herself as being literally paralysed with terror. Something about his eyes. She said that she knew instantly, in the depths of her soul, that this man's intentions were to brutally rape, torture, and kill her. And that by the time the psychotic had exited into a secluded area and actually said what his true intentions were, she wasn't the least bit surprised, because she knew that she was just going to be some grisly discovery for some amateur botanist or scout troop a few days later, unless she could focus her way into a soul connection that would prevent this man from murdering her. To focus intently on this psychotic as an ensouled and beautiful, albeit tormented person in his own right, rather than merely as a threat to her. And I'm well aware that what she is about to describe is just another variant of the old, stale, love will conquer all. But for the moment, just bracket your contempt and try and see what it is that she actually has the courage and conviction to really attempt here. Because imagine what it must have felt like for her. For anyone. Contemplate just how little kid level scared you'd be that this psychotic could bring you to this point simply by wishing it. And now here she is in the car, and she's realising that she's in for the biggest struggle of her spiritual life. She stares directly into the psychopath's right eye. She wills herself to keep her gaze on him directly at all times. And the effects of her focus, well, she said when she was able to hold her focus, the psychopath behind the wheel would gradually stop ranting and become tensely silent, and she wills herself not to weep or plead, but merely to use focus as an opportunity to empathise. Well, this was my first hint of sadness at listening to this anecdote, because I began to admire certain qualities in her story that were the same qualities I'd been contemptuous of when I first picked her up in the park. Now, he asks her to get out of the car and lie prone on the ground, and she doesn't hesitate or beg. She's experiencing a whole new depth of focus. She said she can hear the tick of a cooling car, bees, birds. Imagine the temptation to despair at the sound of carefree birds just yards from where you lay breathing in the weeds. And in this heightened state, she said she could feel the psychotic realising the truth of the situation at the same time she did. And when he came over to her and turned her over, he was crying. And she said it took no effort of will to hold him as he wept. as he raped her. She just stared into his eyes lovingly the entire time. She just stayed where he left her all day in the gravel, weeping and giving thanks to her religious principles. She wept out of gratitude, she said. Well, I don't mind telling you, I'd begun to cry at the story's climax. Not loudly, but I did. She had learnt more about love that day with a sex offender than at any other point in her spiritual journey. And I realised at that moment that I've never loved anyone before. She addressed the psychotic's core weakness, the terror of a soul-exposing connection with another human being. Nor is any of this all that different to a man sizing up an attractive girl at a concert, pushing all the right buttons to induce her to come home with him, lighting her cigarettes and engaging in an hour of post-coital chit-chat, seemingly very intent and close, but what he really wants to do is give her a very special disconnected telephone number and never contact her again. But the reason behind this cold and victimising behaviour is that the very connection he's been trying so hard to make her feel terrifies him. Do you see how open I'm being with you here? I know I'm not telling you anything that you haven't decided that you already know. I can see you forming judgments. With that chilly smile. You're not the only one that can read people, you know. And you know what? It's because of her influence that I am more sad for you than I am pissed off. Because the impact of this story was profound, and I'm not even going to begin to describe it to you. Can you imagine how any of this felt? To see her sandals on the floor across the room, and to remember what I had thought of them only hours before. And I'd say her name, and she'd say, "What?" And I'd say her name again. Well, I'm not embarrassed. I do not care how this sounds to you now. Can you not see how I can just let her go after this? I grabbed her skirt and I begged her not to leave. And I watched her gently close the door and walk off barefoot down the hall. And never seeing her again. Now, it didn't matter that she was fluffy or not terribly bright. Nothing mattered. She had all of my attention. I had fallen in love with her. I believed she could save me. I'm aware of all this, how all this sounds. I can see that in your face, and I know you. I know what you're thinking. So ask it. Ask it now. This is your chance. I believe she could save me, I said. Ask it now. Say something. I stand here naked before you. Judge me, you bitch. You happy now? You all worn out? Well, be happy, because I don't care. I knew she could, and I knew I loved. End of story.